What would you do when happiness, which seemed so unshakable, is suddenly tested by loneliness and unexpected emotions? Mary, a young woman living in what appeared to be a perfect marriage, found her life taking a shocking turn. The arrival of her husband's three close friends, Ethan, Mark, and Ryan, unraveled a series of events that changed everything. This is a tale of love, betrayal, and intense inner conflict that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Let's dive into the story. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to stay updated with more heartfelt and meaningful stories on our channel. Your support means the world to us. Thank you so much. My name is Mary, and I am 25 years old. I have been married to Brian, the love of my life, for 3 wonderful years. From the moment we met, I was drawn to his magnetic charm and steadfast determination. Emmer is a hard-working man, deeply committed to his profession as a truck driver, a job that often keeps him on the road for weeks at a time. Despite the inevitable challenges that came with his demanding schedule, I fell head over heels for him. It wasn't long before we decided to take a leap of faith, and in an emotional ceremony surrounded by our closest family and friends, we vowed to spend our lives together. The first couple of years of marriage were nothing short of magical. Although Emmer's job kept him away for long stretches, I cherished the time we spent together. I poured my heart into creating a warm, inviting home, a sanctuary where he could relax after his long journeys. I eagerly anticipated his return, and those reunions were filled with laughter, tender embraces, and the kind of joy that made every moment apart seem worthwhile. Our love felt indestructible, and the memories we created during those times painted our life together with vivid colors of happiness. However, as time passed, the distance began to take its toll. The long nights felt even longer, and the once vivid colors of our life began to fade. I missed Emmer's presence, his comforting voice, his shared laughter, and even the little quirks that made up our day-to-day life. The house, once a lively refuge, grew eerily quiet in his absence. I yearned for someone to share my joys, worries, and the mundane moments that together weave the fabric of a fulfilling life. The loneliness crept in slowly, but surely, leaving an ache that only companionship could soothe. During one of Emmer's short visits home, he shared some news that would unknowingly alter the course of my life. He told me he had invited his 3 closest friends, Ethan, Mark, and Ryan, to stay with us while he was away. These friends, whom he described as brothers, had been a significant part of his life, and he wanted me to know them better. Initially, I was thrilled by the idea. It felt like an opportunity to make new friends and to find some solace in their presence during Emmer's absences. I imagined nights filled with lively discussions, shared meals, and a rekindling of the warmth that had started to fade. When the day of their arrival came, my emotions swung between excitement and nervousness. I was determined to make a good impression and to ensure they felt truly welcomed in our home. From the moment I met them, I was struck by their distinct personalities. Ethan, with his calm demeanor and thoughtful eyes, Mark, whose laughter seemed to light up the room, and Ryan, whose confident charm was magnetic. All of them brought something unique and refreshing into my life. That evening, I decided to prepare a special dinner as a gesture of goodwill and hospitality. I meticulously planned every detail, from the dishes I chose to the way I decorated the table. I wanted the evening to be memorable, a bridge to help us all feel at ease and build connections. As I watched the table come together, adorned with flickering candles and the delicious aroma of the meal wafting through the air. I felt a flicker of hope that this gathering might help fill the void that had grown in Emmer's absence. Little did I know. This simple gesture of hospitality would set in motion a series of events that would profoundly shape the course of my life. What began as a bid to combat loneliness would grow into an unexpected journey of connection, self-discovery, and change. As we gathered around the dinner table, the room buzzed with the warmth of laughter and stories that seemed to intertwine like an intricate melody. It was a long-lost feeling, one that wrapped around me like a comforting blanket, making my heart swell with a sense of belonging I hadn't felt in years. The flicker of candlelight danced off the walls, casting a glow that softened the edges of everything. Ethan, Mark, and Ryan were animated, their voices rich with humor and camaraderie. Each of them brought a unique energy to the gathering, Ethan's quiet intensity, Mark's infectious laughter, and Ryan's playful wit. I found myself drawn to their vibrant spirits, feeling their eyes on me in ways that both intrigued and unnerved me. As the evening unfolded, I couldn't ignore the way their attention lingered. It wasn't just fleeting glances but a quiet intensity that simmered beneath the surface. Their admiration made me feel seen, as if I had stepped into a spotlight I didn't realize I craved. As glasses of wine emptied and stories grew more personal, the weight of their gazes seemed to grow, carrying an unspoken promise that hung in the air like an unsung verse of a song. Flattered as I was, a small part of me hesitated, sensing the quiet storm brewing beneath the convivial surface. That night, as I lay in bed, my thoughts tangled in a web of excitement and uncertainty. Sleep eluded me, replaced by a restless energy that seemed to pulse in time with my racing heart. When dawn finally broke, its soft light spilling through the curtains, I felt a renewed determination to create something special. I tiptoed into the kitchen, my mind set on making a breakfast that would bring smiles to their faces. Humming a familiar tune, I whisked eggs and brewed coffee, savoring the calmness of the early morning. Suddenly, I felt the warmth of strong arms encircling my waist, pulling me from my thoughts. Startled, I turned to see Ethan, his expression unreadable yet intense. His dark eyes held mine, and for a moment, the world around us seemed to fade. Before I could find the words to ask what he was doing, his lips met mine in a kiss so urgent and unexpected that it took my breath away. Time seemed to stop, and the air between us grew heavy with emotion. In that stolen moment, I felt torn between disbelief and the raw power of the connection we shared. The kiss deepened, and I found myself swept away by feelings I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. It was exhilarating, terrifying, and utterly consuming. The quiet of the house was shattered by our hurried movements, the kitchen transforming into a stage for a passion that had been quietly building. But as the morning sunlight streamed through the windows, reality came rushing back. The enormity of what had just transpired hit me like a tidal wave. I had crossed a line I never thought I would. The guilt settled in my chest like a heavy stone, warring with the undeniable sense of vitality that coursed through me. In Ethan's embrace, I had felt alive in a way I hadn't in so long. But the price of that moment lingered on the edges of my mind, whispering of consequences yet to come. Determined to regain some semblance of normalcy, I put on a brave face as Mark and Ryan joined us for breakfast. Their cheerful chatter filled the air. But inside, I was a maelstrom of emotions, regret, longing, and a yearning for something I couldn't quite name. I busied myself with pouring coffee and serving food, clinging to the routines of the morning to keep myself grounded. As the day wore on, the weight of my emotions became too much to bear. I needed space. A chance to clear my head and find perspective. The forest nearby offered a refuge, its towering trees and dappled sunlight promising solace. As I wandered the winding paths, the cool air filling my lungs, I felt a sense of calm begin to return. That peace, however, was short-lived. Out of the stillness, Mark appeared, his smile as warm as the sunlight filtering through the leaves. His presence was a balm to my restless thoughts. And as we fell into step beside one another, our conversation flowed easily. His charm was undeniable. But what struck me most was his openness. We spoke of dreams and fears, of moments that had shaped us. And I felt an undeniable connection begin to form. There was a kindness in his eyes, a sincerity that made me feel safe, even as my emotions remained a tangled mess. As our walk stretched on, Mark paused, turning to face me with an intensity that caught me off guard. He took my hand in his touch gentle but firm. "Come with me," he said softly, his voice laced with a quiet conviction. His invitation hung in the air, and I found myself standing at a crossroads, my heart pulled in conflicting directions. I knew I was walking a dangerous line when I considered his offer. But the allure was impossible to resist. Every rational thought screamed at me to stop, to turn back before it was too late. But the pull was undeniable, like a current sweeping me toward an unknown destination. Almost before I could process my decision, I found myself agreeing to go with him. My heart pounded as we left together, our steps in sync. Yet our thoughts were anything but. We were drawn to each other with an intensity that neither of us could explain nor resist. The journey to his hotel was quiet, yet the air between us was charged with an energy that needed no words. Every glance, every accidental brush of our hands, carried an unspoken promise of what might come next. As we reached his room and stepped inside, the silence was broken only by the sound of the door clicking shut. Time seemed to slow as we faced each other, a moment suspended in tension. Then, as if an invisible force had taken over, we moved closer. Our kiss was a fiery collision, a surge of passion that consumed every shred of self-control. Mark gently guided me to the bed, his touch so tender and deliberate that it felt as if he was peeling away every layer of doubt and hesitation. His fingers grazed my skin with an exquisite gentleness, making me feel cherished in a way that left me breathless. As we surrendered to the heat between us, the world outside ceased to exist. There were no rules, no consequences. Only the two of us locked in a rhythm that felt both primal and deeply intimate. Every moment felt endless, every touch a reaffirmation of a connection I hadn't known I craved. Yet, as the passion ebbed and reality began to seep back in, a wave of guilt washed over me with crushing force. I had betrayed Brian, not once, but now twice, and this time with one of his closest friends. The enormity of my actions hit me like a tidal wave, threatening to drown me in shame and confusion. How had I come to this? How could I reconcile the part of me that longed for the safety of Brian's love with the part that burned for the thrill of the forbidden? Returning home, my heart felt like a stone in my chest, and my thoughts spiraled in a chaotic storm. I had tasted something exhilarating and dangerous, and despite the guilt gnawing at me, I couldn't shake the magnetic pull I felt toward these men. That night, lying alone in bed, I wrestled with emotions that refused to be silenced. Shame battled with desire, guilt with exhilaration. I tried to convince myself that I could stop. That I could untangle myself from this web before it was too late. But deep down, I wasn't sure I wanted to. Just as I was on the verge of succumbing to restless sleep, a soft knock at the door startled me. For a moment, I hesitated, torn between curiosity and apprehension. Finally, I got up and opened the door, my heart racing. Standing there was Iena, his expression a mix of seriousness and discomfort. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice low and hesitant. I stepped aside to let him in, trying to steady my breath as he entered. Once inside, he began to speak, his words cautious but sincere. He apologized, saying he hoped his friends hadn't made me feel uncomfortable and that he valued our friendship, and Brian, too much to cross any boundaries. His earnestness cut through me like a knife, his kindness only amplifying my guilt. I assured him that everything was fine, though my voice wavered with the weight of my emotions. As the conversation lingered, I noticed something in Iena's demeanor. His eyes would flicker to my lips. His breathing quickened ever so slightly, and a tension began to build between us. It was a quiet, unspoken thing, but it hung in the air like a charged storm. My heart raced, and before I could stop myself, I leaned in, brushing my lips against his. He froze for a moment, startled, but then he responded, his kiss tender yet full of restrained intensity. Unlike the fiery passion I'd felt with Ethan and Mark, what I experienced with Iena was different. It was slower, more deliberate, as if every touch, every kiss was imbued with meaning. We took our time, exploring the depths of this unexpected connection, letting it unfold naturally. The tenderness between us was disarming, and for a moment, I allowed myself to get lost in it. This wasn't just about desire, it was about vulnerability. About being seen and held in a way that felt profoundly intimate. When it was over, Iena pulled away, his expression a mixture of regret and longing. He apologized softly, saying he hadn't meant for things to go so far. And then he quietly left the room. Alone once more. The weight of what I had done came crashing down on me. I had betrayed Brian again. This time with all three of his closest friends. Each act of betrayal felt like another layer of deceit wrapped around me, suffocating and inescapable. That night, as I lay in bed, the gravity of my actions hit me with full force. I was no longer just betraying Brian, I was betraying myself. The person I thought I was. The thrill of temptation had turned into a spiral of lies and heartbreak. And I didn't know how to find my way out. How could I face Brian after all of this? How could I untangle myself from the emotions that now bound me to his friends? I had crossed a line I could never uncross. And the path ahead seemed more uncertain than ever. Over the course of the next month, the secret meetings with Ethan, Mark, and Iena became a recurring escape. A dangerous routine that I knew I should end but couldn't bring myself to stop. Each encounter seemed to tighten the grip of this illicit world on me. It felt as though I had developed a dependence. Not just on the thrill of secrecy, but on the rush of emotions that these encounters evoked. With every moment Brian was away, I sought out new excuses to leave the house, weaving a tapestry of half-truths to conceal my actions. Sometimes, these meetings were seemingly harmless, sharing coffee at a quiet cafe tucked away in the city's forgotten corners. But more often than not, they escalated into moments of stolen passion. Moments that left me both exhilarated and ashamed. I told myself repeatedly that this was the last time. That I could walk away and reclaim the life I was jeopardizing. Yet each secret rendezvous pulled me deeper into a web of deception that grew more tangled with every lie. As these hidden affairs continued, the weight of guilt began to settle heavily on my shoulders. The mirror became my enemy, reflecting a version of myself I no longer recognized. I was haunted by questions I couldn't answer. Who had I become? How had I allowed my life to spiral into such chaos? The vibrant, confident person I once was had been replaced by someone burdened by secrecy and self-doubt. Fear became my constant companion, fear of discovery, fear of losing Brian, and fear of the consequences of my own recklessness. Every time Brian looked at me, I felt as if he could see through my facade. As if he could sense the betrayal lurking beneath my carefully composed exterior. The anxiety of living a double life drained me, eroding both my mental and physical well-being. I was no longer living, I was merely surviving, teetering on the edge of exposure with every passing day. One evening, as I prepared for yet another meeting, a phone call from Brian shattered my plans. His voice was calm but carried an unusual seriousness that sent a jolt of panic through me. He explained that due to unexpected delays at work, he would be returning home earlier than anticipated. My heart raced as I scrambled to cancel my plans, fabricating yet another excuse to avoid suspicion. The guilt that followed was suffocating, a constant reminder of how far I had fallen. When Brian arrived home, I greeted him with a forced smile, pretending as though everything was perfectly normal. But inside, the guilt gnawed at me relentlessly. Each passing day only intensified my inner turmoil. I found myself withdrawing, consumed by shame and fear, unable to focus on anything beyond the growing chasm between the person I was and the person I had become. Eventually, the burden became unbearable. One night, unable to endure the weight of my lies any longer, I made the decision to come clean. My heart felt like it might shatter as I sat down with Brian, forcing myself to meet his gaze. Slowly, haltingly, I confessed everything: the clandestine meetings, the betrayal, and the overwhelming guilt that had consumed me. The silence that followed was deafening. Brian's expression shifted from shock to deep sorrow, each word of my confession leaving an indelible mark. When I finally finished, the air between us was heavy with tension. Through trembling words, I begged for his forgiveness, desperately trying to explain the emptiness and desire that had driven me to make such catastrophic mistakes. I poured out my regrets, my apologies, and my shame. Brian's response was measured but heartbreaking. He told me that while he appreciated my honesty, the damage had been done. The trust we had built over the years was shattered, and he needed time to process everything. He decided to move out temporarily, leaving me to grapple with the ruins of our relationship alone. In the weeks that followed, I sought therapy in an attempt to understand the choices I had made and the pain I had caused. The sessions were grueling, forcing me to confront truths I had long avoided. But they also provided clarity, helping me see the deeper issues that had led to my destructive behavior. Slowly, I began to piece together the fragments of my shattered identity. Despite my efforts to make amends, the wounds I had inflicted on Brian were too deep to heal. After much deliberation, he made the difficult decision to end our relationship. The betrayal had left scars that neither time nor effort could erase, and he needed to move forward to find peace and happiness. Mary once believed her happiness was built on a solid foundation. However, loneliness and temptation led her into a whirlwind of mistakes and heartache. facing the consequences of betrayal. She not only lost her husband but also her confidence in herself. Yet, this collapse marked the beginning of a journey towards self-healing and rediscovery. Through the pain, she realized that true happiness doesn't come from fleeting connections but from honesty, respect, and the courage to confront life's challenges rather than running from them. Remember, trust and understanding are the cornerstones of love. If you ever feel lost in your relationship, don't bottle up your emotions. Instead, communicate openly, seek empathy, and address the root of the issue. Temporary choices may provide fleeting comfort, but the lasting consequences are unavoidable. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story. If you want to discover more meaningful lessons and captivating stories, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss our upcoming videos. Your support is the greatest motivation for us. Thank you so much.